Greetings, greenhouse people. I'm your host, Bill Calkins, and because we like to provide critical information in as many formats as possible, this will be available as a podcast and a video, however you want to consume educational content. My guest today is Dr. Alicain Carlson, and she's been with Syngenta for more than 9 years in various marketing and technical roles. And before joining Syngenta, she earned her MS and PhD in the cut flower research program with Dr. John Dole at NC State. She studied various aspects of production and post-harvest of cut flowers and co-wrote the book Post-Harvest Handling of Cut Flowers and Greens, and she found her love of cut flowers through floral design and working on a cut flower farm in college. And Syngenta's dedicated breeding for specialty cuts is world class, and Dahlia is a program with tons of options for growers in terms of inputs and varieties. And I'm really excited to learn more. Alicain, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's really exciting to be here and to be able to share more about that exciting cut flower dahlia program, because it is really unique in its own respect, especially to the specialty cut flower world. So I've got some insights into that and some of the efficiencies that can bring to your farm, and thinking about cut flower dahlias in a little different way. And then also sharing some, tips and tricks on how to optimize your dahlia crop, starting from unrooted cuttings, but also just in general. So let's get into it. All right, so have to start off with some eye candy. We all love dahlias for just they're just so beautiful. All the different colors and the forms, and the flowers are just so dynamic. And so it's really exciting that we have these to offer, from our assortment too, from, the landscape types, in the pots, but then also these cut flowers. And they've really just taken off in the specialty cut flower world here recently, and excited to offer some more to specialty cut flower growers. And dahlias are kind of like the quintessential specialty cut flower because they don't ship very well, and their vase life just kind of historically isn't that long. So it's not really conducive for them to be stuffed in a box and, shipped long distances and stored for a long time. So, this is really where the specialty cut flower growers, can thrive and shine in their novelty there. So a little bit about our assortment. So we have, we're super excited to have Cafe au Lait, which is the number one dahlia in like North America right now, and has been for a while. Brides ask for it by name. It's kind of the stargazer lily of the dahlia world. So, Martha Stewart has talked about it. Like it's kind of one of those dahlias that's become just a name. It's known to, the general consumers. So we're excited to offer this, and from unrooted cuttings. So this is a little different for flower farmers, because usually, you're used to getting your dahlias from tubers, looking for tubers, digging tubers, storing tubers, tubers. But it's fairly common in the bedding plant industry to start dahlias from unrooted cuttings. So, there's a lot known culturally about how to do this, but bringing this product form of an unrooted cutting and then like planting a rooted liner for flower farmers is fairly novel. So we're happy to get some more information out there about how to do this, because one of the key attributes to this is that, just like all of our bedding plant dahlias, they come from our production farms where we're producing stock plants of dahlia cuttings, and they're clean, they're virus indexed, they're disease free. So you're starting from a clean input. Which, with tubers, that can be really challenging. And especially if you save your own tubers and, depending on the conditions that you have, there are viruses that can build up in dahlia tubers, and there's, different bacterium and whatnot that can be problematic or that people want to avoid. And this is another way to start clean, and not have to worry about those things. So it's a nice alternative that comes into flowering and grows in the same amount of time or faster, just kind of depending on the health of your tubers. So, and it's cost effective, like there's lots of benefits to it. This slide is showing our Karma Dahlia series. So these were specifically bred for cut flower production. So they're vigorous. They have long stems, so the internode growth is going to be, more than with a dahlia that's bred for the landscape. Big flowers, unique flower forms, so they're specifically bred for this. And the karmas can be harvested at a slightly tighter opening stage, which we can talk about a little bit more when it comes to post-harvest, than other dahlias. So that way they have a little bit longer base life, and can be transported like in your buckets a little bit easier. They won't be as sensitive as, fully open flowers. If they're a little more closed, that tends to help protect them from bruising a little more. So we have a nice color range here. And this year we added Karma Caroline, this coral pinky color with a little bit of purple, a little bit of yellow in it. It's absolutely gorgeous. We added that this year. So very, very excited to continue to build out this assortment. Okay, so then here's a slide that kind of touches on some of the pros and cons, because there's pros and cons to everything, right, Bill? It's always something. So want to be very clear about, when, who this would be appropriate for and like what the limitations are. So definitely some of the pros there that I mentioned, virus and disease free, especially if they're coming from Syngenta flowers. That's what we do. They're easy to schedule. So, you order your cuttings or your rooted liners, and when they're coming. When you want to put them in the ground, you can plan, you can schedule. They will have consistent growth and development across like the entire row that you have, because they're all from the same stock, grown the same way from the same plug tray. So you'll get harvests consistently, and you won't have kind of like that up and down look of growth and development that you can get from tubers, because they're not always the same size down the row, so that affects that. One of my favorite things, and I have dug dahlia tubers before, it is not a fun thing to do. It's not even fun to really plant them, because it's kind of hard to jam the tuber, into the ground, or if you're trying to plant into plastic and like the hole, it's not the fastest thing. So with this option, there's no need to dig or store tubers at the end of the year and like through the winter storage. So you don't have to kind of like cross your fingers, and hope they survive the storage technique that you've tried to optimize from, season over season over season that works some years and not others. Just forget about what's in the ground, till it under, whatever you want to do, and just start new the next year from this liner that is super easy to plant into the ground, just like anything else that you start in a tray. So if you have, ways to automate that, like the farm that I worked on, we loved using the Photoperiod. Have you heard of that before, Bill?
I haven't.
It's super cool. Like it's like this tube where you can stand and you put it in the ground, and then you press the lever and it opens the bottom. You drop a plug down the middle of it and it lands in the ground, and then you pull it out, and like so easy. So you can just use more efficient ways of, planting out your dahlia crops when it's in a product form that you use for everything else. And then there's cost savings starting with this too. Just depending on the price of the tubers, the size of the tuber, what your expectations are of getting a tuber, there can often be cost savings. A couple of the cons are that there are less number of varieties available from this unrooted cutting form compared to tubers. And that's just kind of where we are in the industry with this. But hopefully you all come to love this form for cut flowers, and then we can produce even more at our farm. So we need that demand in order to increase the supply, and then we can have even more varieties to offer. So that's kind of a limiting factor. We don't expect everyone to just completely, tubers aren't going to go away, because we can't meet this need, and we don't want them to go away. But this is just another option for, a different scale, different way of growing. And then, so they tend to be, and this may be a pro Oricon. I wasn't quite sure where to put a Bill, but but they tend to be available in like large quantities, and a lot of producers, young plant producers, are playing around with different tray sizes to produce these in, because they recognize that some specialty cut flower growers don't need a full 105 tray of these varieties. Some do, and some don't. So checking in with different root and cells and different young plant suppliers on the number, like their minimum numbers of varieties, is good. So yeah, so you can optimize that for your needs. And those photos are just examples of how they get shipped to you. And even on this one here, you can see the teeny tiny little tubers that even do form on these, because they will form tubers at the end of the season. All right, so a little bit on propagation for those who are maybe starting a rooted program or rooting their own, and then just what you can expect in what you receive. We recommend the smallest of 105 cell tray, and then like up to a 50 cell. And then we absolutely recommend using rooting hormone. Dahlias can be kind of finicky and uneven just in general, depending on the variety with their rooting, but especially Cafe au lait, that's been around for a long time. She really benefits from having some rooting hormone on. And I've got a slide that shows from a trial that we did some recommendations for those rooting hormones. This is a key thing. So long day lighting is needed in the propagation stage in order to avoid premature tuber formation and flowering if your natural day length is less than 12 hours. So, I mean, we recommend going up to 14 hours if you can extend your day length there. But this is really important to actually get them to root. Otherwise, they just start to kind of shut down, really, which is what the plants are doing under short days in the fall when they're kind of naturally just busting out flowers. Like, they're preparing to shut down for the winter. They're tuberizing to store for overwinter, and they're flowering to reproduce in that way too. So to get pollinators coming in, and there's just the biology of plants. So we want to manipulate that so that way they put in roots. So those long days are super, super important. And then one of the things, that last point on do not pinch young plants. So in this stage, and even like right after transplant, do not pinch these dahlias too soon, because you want to pinch them when they have a little more body underneath them. So you get like a nice chassis, as we like to say, under them, and some structure. And so it'll support all this tremendous branching and these big flowers that they're going to have. But if you pinch it at this early stage, you're not really leaving a lot of plant there. They're going to be like wobbly and like thin, and just they're not going to have that branching that you need to have a productive plant. So do not pinch too soon. They will stretch. That's what they're bred for, to have stem length. So, young plant growers, you want to watch. We have some recommendations for PGRs if you want to, control them in this plug stage for like shipping or something, or whatever. We have recommendations for that, but do not pinch it. Don't pinch it. It's going to hurt your customers, or your own production. All right, here's some, we love trials at Syngenta, and we did some trials with some rooting hormones. And, this shows Cafe au lait with either the Hortus IBA rooting hormone, and then we also trialed the product Advocate from Fine Americas next to it to see how that compared. And we're really impressed with the results from Advocate, but also just in general, having a rooting hormone really helps. And you can see just in the tone of them, whether like compared to the control, nice and green, like the leaves are expanding faster. and producing more leaves. But then if you look at the photos down here, you can see the differences in the rooting. And these were all taken at the same time. So it's a true comparison of the root development and the plant development. So you can say even just adding that 100 ppm of the Hortus IBA product really improves the rooting and the amount of rooting, and then the uniformity of the rooting, across the crop. And then the Advocate as well, just at 200 ppm, just significant root growth there. So it was faster to transplant, and get in the ground and start getting it established. We don't recommend going up to 400 ppm because you'll see some toxicity on the leaves. They grew out of it eventually, but just also why spend double on the amount of product you're applying when it's not necessary. So this 200 ppm is kind of our sweet spot here for our recommendation for rooting hormone. All right, and then photoperiod. So like I mentioned with under propagation, photoperiod plays a key role with dahlias. If you watched our mum video on cut flower mum production, we also talk about this, so definitely check that out. Photoperiod is a really key component to a lot of floriculture crops production. And dahlias are facultative short day plants, like mums. It's very similar kind of interaction. And those long days encourage vegetative growth. So that's why, you put your dahlias in the ground in the spring, as soon as it's kind of warm enough to get your plants in there. And then you let them establish, you keep them nice and watered, and fertilized throughout those long days. So they're building that plant. They're building that branching. They're, getting nice and strong and healthy and taking up nutrition and just kind of getting ready for this show of flowering. And they'll flower under the long days too. They'll start to put up flowers, but the big push will be as the day lengths start to get shorter, and also the temperatures getting cooler helps too, which I got some slides for that as well. So yeah, so this chart shows here on the x-axis is just a calendar. So from January to December. And then on the y-axis are the day lengths. And then this just shows how the day lengths change across the year, depending on where you are on the globe. So the closer you are to the equator, like Miami, Florida here, the line's a little bit flatter. And then the further, north you are, closer to the North Pole, the swings become even more greater in your day lengths. Your days get longer, get super long, and super short at the same time. Not at the same time, but in the same year. So this is really great to understand for wherever you are, but also seeing where all those lines cross at that equinox when everyone is at the same day length. So that's really cool to understand, and that's when the initiation for short days really starts, and your dahlias will kick off even more. And then so we have I get a lot of questions about, well, can I grow these in the wintertime? What if I have demand for specialty cut flowers, all year round? What can I grow year round? And you can definitely do these dahlias in the wintertime in a greenhouse with some key considerations, and one being that very important day length consideration. So which in the winter is naturally short day lengths. You'll have to have some ability to lengthen the day length. And we have been doing this for the last couple seasons at Syngenta Flowers at our Gilroy facility in order to grow product for our California spring trials. And those are the photos there of us growing them in bulb crates on a bench. You could also do it on the floor, but that's in a climate controlled greenhouse that has lights where we can extend the day, and also supplement some molds just to add some light to them. And we can get a great crop off of that. So you want to watch that day length. You want to have 14 hours in order to build that vegetative growth. And then once you have a good plant built, you could go to your natural day lengths. You want to watch the temperatures, that they're not too cold, but not too warm, which we'll cover that more later. You want to make sure they're fed, especially if they're in this like smaller soil volume, like of a bulb crate. Just keep an eye on that. Watering as well, so they're not more susceptible to thrips and drying down and everything that can do to slow down the growth. And then of course bugs and diseases that'll come into that love to hang out in greenhouses in the wintertime when there's not much going on. And if you check out this video that I have linked here, our technical scientist in Gilroy, Sam, she shares some great tips for how to do this, and a really great tip for how to minimize some disease impacts with something really simple. So definitely check that out. Okay, this is a question that I get pretty often too. So about well, my cafe au laits aren't fully double. Like, what's going on here? And this slide really shows a good example of how the day length affects the flower quality of dahlias. So we're working on kind of breeding out this kind of effect, but it is kind of hard to unprogram plants sometimes with things like this, because there is a very important biological reason why those centers open as day lengths get shorter. So that way they can be pollinated and produce seed. It just makes it easier for pollinators to get in there, and so that plant can reproduce from year to year. That's kind of the whole point of flowers. So in this slide, you can see we grew these under constant 9.5 hour day lengths, 10.5, 11.5, and then 13.5 hours. The 9.5 hour ones, short days, they didn't do anything. They did not flower. All they did was create that tuber and then sit there like that for like 12 weeks. Like they
Wow.
just, and that's what they do, which is a re-emphasizing why those long days during propagation are really important, because it just stalls the plant. But then 10.5, we got a few flowers off of them, and this is what they looked like. It's basically a single flower with an open center. Like, no one would even really call that cafe au lait. Adding another hour to it helped a little bit, but still not what people expect from cafe au lait. Now at 13.5 hours, and if we would have taken it to even longer, just fully double, big, bodacious flowers, and these plants were, producing like crazy. So you can, yeah, it says it all. And then down here, you can see with our weeks to flower, the ones under shorter day lengths flowered faster than the ones under longer ones, like we would expect, since they're facultative short day plants. Okay, and then another trial result. I love sharing these slides with the fun work that we do in our research. And this one, so Grand Dahlia is one of our landscape type dahlias, but the concept and like the theory of this still applies to these cut flower dahlias. But this temperature interaction with finishing, and then like the plant quality and the average flower number is really important to note and understand as you're watching your dahlia crop that you planted in the spring, and then maybe it kind of stalls and doesn't look very good and isn't super productive in the summertime. But then in the fall, when the temperatures start to cool down, then it seems to like come back to life again, like wake up a little bit and start flowering. A lot of that has to do with the temperatures. So dahlias like it more on the cooler side. So, this plant here at a 66 average daily temperature, it's just the vegetative growth is a little more robust, and it's very happily flowering. Whereas as the temperature increases, yes, it's flowering, but you can see that the vegetative growth it declines kind of linearly, and just kind of looks like hard and like not very happy. Whereas like these leaves are kind of more lush and expanded, these start to like kind of close in on themselves, which to me tells me they're not happy plants. And then you can see like at 59 ADT, it slows them down. Like their average weeks to flower is a few weeks longer, but and the growth isn't quite as good as the 66, but it's still okay. It's okay. But the other thing to note here is this average flower number. So this dahlia that was grown under nearly 80 degrees Fahrenheit the entire time, average daily temperature, only produced about 20 buds. And then as it got cooler, we go from, I'm rounding here, from 20, 30, 40, 50. So there's very much, kind of a almost perfectly linear interaction there with the temperature and the bud count. So that's where those cool temperatures really help with dahlias, and why you might see those changes throughout the season for your crop. Okay, and this slide just kind of summarizes some other things that can affect the flower quality of dahlias. So we talked about the day lengths getting shorter. That's going to open up those flower centers. And then especially with Cafe au Lait, if she's been around for a long time, it's not new breeding, but everyone just loves the color and the beauty of it. So we deal with certain things when we really like plants. But she can be pretty finicky if it's too hot or it's too cold. That'll affect her flower quality. Nutrition also plays a part in there too. We need food in order to keep going and perform at our best. Plants need that too, in order to get those fully double flowers and a lot of flowers. So definitely, if you notice the tone on your dahlias getting pretty light, check your feed. Give them a little boost. All right, and then some tips for planting. So these are, pretty general for most things that you're going to put in the ground. You want to put them into a nice moist soil. Don't put them in the dry ground, because that's just they're not going to. The roots aren't going to reach out and start rooting into your soil if you put them in dry ground. So put them in there moist, so they can get established. With dahlias, you can plant those a little deeper into the ground too, like just a smidge to help anchor them to get them nice and secure, to help build that plant. Most people are putting these out into the field, which is fine, but you could also consider putting some into a hoop house if you have a hoop house, which will help extend the season with the temperature control that you have there, so you'll get a little more into the fall. But then also just that little bit of light reduction, like a little bit of the reduction in the DLI from the plastic, will help push some stem length. So that's kind of a general tip for really all cut flower crops, is that, putting them in that hoop, if you can keep the temperature controlled well enough and get airflow and whatnot through the summer, it'll also help push some stem length. There are some people who don't use support netting with dahlias. I recommend it. I think if you put all that effort into these beautiful plants and growing them all throughout the summer, and then nature comes in with a windstorm through, or a big rain, or something, those unpredictable weather events, the netting helps to a little insurance policy for anything crazy that might happen there. So you can do it, but without it, but I recommend it personally. And then you can play with your spacing on dahlias. Some people have different preferences for their dahlia spacing. 12 by 18 or 12 by 12 is usually where I recommend people go. You can go tighter, but the risk kind of you're taking there in improving that efficiency per square footage is that you don't get super good airflow around the plants. So you'll just have to watch that for powdery mildew and stuff, and just make sure that that it's in a place where you're going to get some airflow. That's what you got to watch out for. And then pinching. So I mentioned pinching earlier in the propagation part of this, how you don't want to pinch too early. And so that key pinching time is once you've got it in the ground, or if you're doing it in the winter, you got it in your bulb crate, and you've got a nice plant that's starting to build there. That's maybe, I don't know, they get to a nickel to maybe a quarter size diameter of that main stem. You've got laterals coming off of it, and maybe you have 6 to 7 nodes on it, and you go in and give it a hard pinch and take out that top few nodes. So it's kind of I'm used to calling it a hard pinch, like something that you would give a poinsettia, if you're familiar with that, or our recommendations for our Sunfinity plant are also to like stack some nodes on it and give it a hard pinch. So it's not something you should necessarily be able to do just with your thumb or your fingers. You'll need some clippers to get a nice clean cut because it'll be a thicker stem. And they'll be about 12 to 18 inches tall at that point. And that helps build that strong architecture under that plant. So when you get all those stems on it and all those flowers on it, it can support it better. And then watering and fertilization, like I mentioned, if you keep up with the watering and with the fertilization and feed them, you'll build a nice healthy plant. You'll get nice fully double flowers, great coloration. But also one of the key differences with tubers versus liners is in this watering and fertilization step. So if you're really familiar with growing dahlias from tubers, you'll need to apply more water and more fertilization to like starting from a liner than from a tuber, because those plants started from tubers, they have that big tuber attached to them. And so they have a little bit of nutrition in there and they have a little extra water in there where, you don't want to overwater your tubers because you will rot your tubers. But with the liners, they don't have that. They need to be watered like other stuff that you don't start from tubers. So that way they can get established, get a root system on them and be able to take up that nutrition from your soils and from the fertilization that you're putting on. So that is a really key step in order to get them established. And then drip tape is best on these. I mean, I know there are some growers who do, the sprinkler irrigation and whatnot, but really you want to keep the water off the foliage as much as you possibly can. We can't control the rain so much, but where we can control it, by utilizing drip tape, that is definitely my best recommendation. And then adjusting that fertilizer rate as needed to keep a nice green tone. And I love this picture that shows our smiling faces at Syngenta, but also like kind of how the potential of some of these of some of our dahlias here. This is Karma Sangria, which is definitely one of my favorites, second to Caroline. But just love that flower form and the colors and the productivity and just, nice healthy plants there. And then some of the pests and diseases, these are yummy plants. They're beautiful flowers that attract, various bugs and disease. So you want to watch out for these different things. Here's some of the more like common ones that, we've found on them. But you really want to work on preventing this, not trying to correct it like after they have it, because I mean, once things like thrips like get into the flowers or various, beetles and whatnot that I could have also added to this list, it's kind of too late. So it's best to prevent rather than try to correct. So protect them, scout often, and there are great programs out there for folks who want to utilize chemistries and different, IPM programs for protecting their dahlia crops. And then last but not least, post-harvest care for dahlias, which is a big a question I get all the time because there's so much variety and variation in dahlias, and there's so many different recommendations. And the vase life in general kind of isn't really that long, usually 4 to 7 days. If you get 7 days out of a dahlia, you're doing something right. So, and that's just how they are. Like I mentioned, with the true epitome of a specialty cut flower. So the ideal stage of harvest is to harvest when several rows of the back petals, so like the very first ones kind of on the outside, are open, but that the very back ones haven't started to senesce. So if part of that flower has started to senesce already, you waited too long. And then I recommend a holding solution that will provide sugars to the flowers. So a commercial holding solution is like there's products from Floralife or Chrysol, and They both work great, and they have three main components to them that help improve the vase life of flowers. So the first one is that it makes the water pH acidic, which makes the water easier for the stem to take up. So it's just nice and easy, fluid, so they can stay hydrated. Um, the uh, the other thing is that they help to compensate for some of your, like maybe if your water quality isn't super good, it'll help balance the pH and the EC, the electrical conductivity, the salts in there to be more optimal for cut flowers. There's also a biocide in the floral preservatives that helps cut back bacteria growth that can clog up the stems. And then carbohydrates, sugars. So the sugars, just like they feed us, they feed the flowers too. And those holding solutions have the sugar in them. So I recommend that to help your dahlia flowers continue to open and also keep a good coloration. The sugars will help with the color, stronger color saturation too. Some folks also like to use the slow release chlorine tablets, the Chrysal CBBN products. They work great too for controlling the bacteria, increasing water uptake and all that. They just don't have sugars in them. So I recommend switching to, maybe you cut them into the chlorine tablet and then like right before your market or when you sell them, right before you sell them, put them in a holding solution so they can start to take up some more sugars. And yeah, those are my best tips for maintaining the vase life on dahlias. So yeah, that concludes my best practices and tips and tricks for starting your cut flower dahlia crop from unrooted cuttings.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Allison. If growers are used to growing dahlias from tubers, might be wondering, should I try URCs or liners? I think you've given some great reasons. I think that the uniformity and clean stock is got to be the key reason. But then the fact that your availability, you can get them in larger quantities. It's just seems like a great option. And like you said, this is just the perfect crop for a locally grown, locally produced crop to send to your wholesale customers. But you really need to pay attention to that day length. You got to pay attention to temperature. You've got to stay on top of the water, the feeding, and then use some of these post-harvest tricks. And then that's just good growing. And then once you produce the crop, you're really going to be, heads and shoulders above a lot of competition when it comes to that wholesale offering that you have. And I think, for specialty cut flower growers considering this, start with that Karma, Caroline, and Sangria because those are stunning. I mean, wow, those are just absolutely beautiful. I can see why you like them so much. So,
Definitely.
and thank you so much, Allison. This has really been great. I appreciate all of your time.
Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome. Thanks for the invitation, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon.
For sure, for sure. And I guess before we close, where can folks find more information about Syngenta's specialty cut program, and if they can get in touch with your team with if they have questions, things like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So on our Syngenta Flowers website, syngentaflowers-us.com, we have some great resources. We have a dedicated cut flower landing page that has our cut flower brochure on it, so you can see even more of our assortment. It even has some post-harvest tips in it. And on that landing page, we have some of our culture guides and some other like tips and tricks, and we continue to build out, even more in that resource as time goes on. So, and then you can definitely reach out to any of us on on the Syngenta team and get connected for technical support. So we have a great technical team that would also love to support anyone in their questions.
Awesome. I can vouch for that. You guys do have a great team. And for the listeners and viewers, if you like this installment, be sure to subscribe to Tech On Demand Podcast on your favorite app and find tons of videos just like this one on Ball Seed's YouTube channel. And I'm your host, Bill Calkins, and on behalf of Dr. Alicain Carlson and the whole team at Syngenta, take care out there. Happy growing.